My father died suddenly. A few weeks later, his old friend from the army came to our house to help, as he said. A few months later, my sister disappeared. Everyone thought it was a tragedy. But I started searching. And that's when the real hell began. My name is Lauren, and last spring is something I can no longer remember without trembling. It all started with a phone call we never expected. Police. Accident. Heart attack. Our dad didn't make it. He died behind the wheel on his way to pick up my mom from the library. He just disappeared while the radio was playing some old song that he was probably humming along to. He was only 56. He never complained, he only went to the clinic for checkups. There are 3 of us left. My mom, me, and Emma, my older sister. From the first evening in the house without Dad, everything changed. The house was silent. The TV wasn't on. The coffee maker in the kitchen was empty. And there was something in the air, something lifeless. My mother went to bed early, but I could hear her lying awake. She just lay there, sometimes crying quietly. Her hands trembled when she tried to cut vegetables. She stopped reading, stopped leafing through her magazines, and didn't even answer the phone. She was like she was behind glass, and I didn't know how to get her out of there. Emma held on. She seemed strong, like she was on autopilot. She organized the funeral, contacted the bank, and closed my dad's accounts. But I saw her sitting on the porch every night, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the darkness, not moving for hours. And I was just there. 17 is that age when you think you're an adult, but you're really just a kid with a fake, everything's okay, face. I wore my dad's sweaters because they still smelled like him. I wrote in the notebook he gave me. I rode his bike. All things took on weight, a meaning that didn't make sense but had an impact. A week after the funeral, Mark showed up. My mom said he was an old friend of my dad's. They served together in Iraq. I didn't remember much about him. I think we met when I was 9. He looked a little older, with gray hair showing in his beard. He was dressed simply, a dark jacket, jeans, sneakers. He brought my mom flowers. He hugged her. He looked at Emma and me and said, "I know there's nothing I can do to fix this. But I'm here if you need anything." At first, I thought he was just staying for a day or 2. But he stayed. He slept in the guest room, helped with the cooking, repaired a broken faucet, and bought a light bulb for the bathroom. He was quiet, calm, with the look of a man who couldn't come to terms with himself. And I was grateful. Everyone was. It seemed like he had come at just the right moment when we didn't know how to go on. But something was stirring inside me. I just didn't know it yet. It was anxiety. Anxiety that lurks in the shadows and waits for you to stop watching the door warily. Mark didn't act like a guest. He acted as if he had just returned home after a long absence. Every morning he got up before everyone else, made coffee in the kitchen, and quietly prepared breakfast. For the first few days, it seemed like a gesture of support. My mother said, "He just wants to help, don't push him away." I didn't push him away. But something prevented me from relaxing. I wasn't used to strange men in pajamas walking barefoot around our kitchen. I wasn't used to him being the first person to greet me when I came home from school as if it were normal. He really did everything right. He made soup when my mom got sick. He offered to put a new lock on the front door because the old one was easy to open. He brought me new headphones just because he remembered that I had lost mine. And when I asked him, a little embarrassed, how he knew, he just shrugged. "Your mom told me." My mom blossomed around him. For the first time in a long time, she put on makeup and went to the hairdresser. She started listening to music while cooking. She laughed. Once I even heard her say to him, "I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you." I sat in my room and pretended that everything was fine. I immersed myself in my homework, drew in my notebook, which had no more blank pages left. Everything looked so right that I felt ashamed of my suspicion. Maybe I just don't know how to accept kindness? But Emma, she wasn't home. From the moment Mark arrived, she became even quieter. It was as if she didn't exist in the same reality as my mom and me and our new normal. She got up late, ate alone, and answered in one-word sentences. When Mark asked her something, she nodded or said, "I don't know." "It's grief," my mom said. "Everyone deals with it in their own way." Mark never pushed. At least not on the outside. He said he respected her space, that he understood. Then one day, when I was alone in my room, he said, "Emma is strong. But she shouldn't have to be alone in this. Tell her she's important. That we're here for her." It was supposed to sound supportive. But something struck me. I didn't know why. It was just something in his voice. It sounded too confident. Like he had already decided he knew us better than we knew ourselves. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to someone quietly walking around the kitchen. The clock said 2:47. I got up and peeked out. No one was there. Just an open window and the smell of coffee. I didn't tell my mom about the window at night and the smell of coffee. In the morning, everything looked so ordinary that it seemed like I had made it up. At school, I was distracted, forgot the answers to simple questions, and caught myself just staring out the window and not listening to the teacher. When I got home, Mark was already working on something in the garage. He was repainting my dad's old table, the one we used to draw on when we were little. I stopped and watched. His movements were precise and confident. Too confident for a family friend who had just come over to help out. I think it'll be better if it's white, he said without even turning his head. I didn't answer. To me, that table belonged to my dad. With paint stains. With scratches. With traces of pens we used to write, Emma and Loren, in our childish handwriting. And Mark just covered everything with a new coat of paint. It'll look like new, he added. And I thought, maybe that's his plan? To make everything new? That evening, my mom invited us to have dinner together for the first time since early May. Mark made shrimp pasta, set the table, and turned on the soft lighting. He sat across from us, talking about trivial things, new projects, movies to watch. Mom laughed. Her laughter sounded strange. Too loud, too sudden. I caught Emma's eye. She was hardly eating. She just twirled her fork around her plate until Mark said, "You're so quiet tonight, Em. Is everything okay?" She looked up. And I can't explain what I saw. There was no anger. But there was no fear either. It was cold. Like ice. She looked straight at him and replied, "You don't have to call me that." Mark smiled. Slowly. With that smile he always gave when something was no big deal. "Okay," he said. "I'm sorry, Emma." Mom quickly changed the subject. But the silence that hung in the air after those words didn't go away. It remained between us, in the corners of the room, inside me. Later that evening, as I lay in bed, I thought I heard someone walking quietly down the hall. Slowly, carefully, I held my breath. The footsteps stopped at my door. And stayed there. Silent. I didn't open my eyes. I couldn't. After a few minutes, the footsteps receded. The guest room door clicked shut. The next morning, my mother said, "Mark bought us new locks for the windows. He says it's safer." And for the first time, I wondered, who exactly are we hiding from now? In recent weeks, I stopped sleeping normally. I could fall asleep, but I always woke up at night at exactly the same time. 2:47 a.m. Like an alarm clock. And always the same sound. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow, steady, almost silent. They stopped right outside my door. No knocking, no touching. Just silence on the other side. And it sent a chill down my spine. I lay there silently, holding my breath. Once I couldn't take it anymore and cautiously peeked through the crack between the door and the floor. There was a dim light in the hallway. And I saw a shadow. A human shadow. It stood right in front of my door. For a few minutes. And then it left. In the morning, I went into the kitchen. Mom was stirring coffee. Mark was peeling oranges as if nothing had happened. He asked how I slept. He smiled. My throat was dry, but I forced myself to answer, "Fine." After breakfast, I went to the bathroom and saw my toothbrush in a different glass. Not where I had left it. It was funny, but it also unsettled me. Before, I would have thought someone had cleaned up or that my mom had made a mistake. Not now. Everything that changed without my knowledge began to feel like interference. Surveillance. Control. That same day, I found my phone fully charged, even though I definitely hadn't left it charging. I checked my history. 2 tabs in my browser were closed. My tabs. I knew because I had kept them open for weeks. I was still trying to hold on. But it was like a hangover after a trauma. Reality was out of focus, but somewhere in the center was a clear signal that something was wrong. And it was getting louder every day. Mark made lasagna for dinner. Mom praised him and laughed. I looked at her. She no longer looked devastated, but she wasn't herself either. She listened to his words with her head tilted slightly, like a student afraid of missing something important. Her shoulders slumped, and she accepted every suggestion he made, from the choice of movie to the type of wine. Emma only appeared at the end of dinner. She walked past us, took a plate, but didn't sit down at the table. She just said, "I'll eat in my room. Why don't you sit with us for a few minutes?" Mark asked casually, calmly, but something clicked in his voice. Emma looked at him, and in that silence her gaze was sharp as a knife. "You're not my dad," she replied. "And don't act like you are." Mom turned to her. "Emma, what's that tone?" But she had already turned away and gone upstairs. I expected Mark to get angry, but he just said she's still hurting. She just needs time. And again that smile of his. Short. Controlled. When I went to my room, Emma was already waiting for me there. Close the door, she said. I did as she said. Do you notice anything? Her voice was flat, even. Not scared, not angry. Just from inside. With the phone, with things. You feel like something's changing, but you don't know how to prove it. I nodded. For the first time. Out loud. Emma took a small tablet out of her pocket. I write everything here. Every day. What I see, what happens when no one is looking. It's my only proof. If something happens, look for it. But don't tell Mom. And don't trust anyone who comes too easily and leaves too much behind. What do you mean? I whispered. She didn't answer. She just looked at me for a long time as if I had just woken up. Then she went to her room. And we never spoke about it again. Every evening when I heard those same footsteps outside my door, I was no longer just afraid. I began to wait. Because I knew that if he was standing outside my door today, tomorrow he might come in. Saturday began quietly. Mom went to the store with Mark, saying they needed to fix something in the kitchen and buy some parts. I stayed home. Emma was still in her room. I heard her go down to the kitchen to get some water, then come back upstairs. It was around 11 in the morning. I was writing an essay for English class, trying to concentrate, but I couldn't. Emma's words from yesterday were spinning around in my head. Don't trust someone who leaves too much behind. What did that mean? Does he leave things behind? Impressions? Control? After lunch, I looked into her room. The door was ajar. Her backpack was on the bed, her headphones under the pillow. Her tablet was gone. The bed was made. It was as if she hadn't been there at all. I walked through the house, following my usual route. Kitchen, bathroom, yard. The car was in the driveway. The shoes she wore every day were there too. But she was nowhere to be found. Mark and Mom came back an hour later. I immediately asked, "Have you seen Emma?" Mom shrugged. She said something about going to a friend's house. Whose house? I didn't ask. She said she just wanted to get some fresh air. I thought, maybe she really needed to get away. I looked at Mark. He was silent, just staring at his phone screen. Then he looked up and said, "Should we text her?" I already had. And I called. And got no response. Her phone was off. I checked her Instagram, Messenger, even TikTok, nothing. I texted Layla, her close friend. The reply was short. Emma didn't say she was coming. We haven't seen each other in a week. For the first time in all this time, I allowed myself to panic. Not outwardly, inwardly. Everything inside me froze. I walked around the house again. She hadn't taken her makeup. She hadn't taken her charger. Her nightgown was lying on the back of a chair. But her tablet was gone. And I remembered. If something happens, look for it. I turned her room upside down. I checked the nightstands, the bottom drawers, even the underwear drawers. The tablet was gone. I thought maybe she had taken it with her. Or hidden it better than I could have imagined. I went back to my room and lay down. Shadows from the trees danced across the ceiling. And in my head, a new question. What do you do when the people who are supposed to protect you don't see that you're being robbed? In the evening, Mark said. If it's not here by morning, we'll call the police. Mom nodded. Her face was pale. But I didn't believe either of them. Because I knew they would wait. But I wouldn't. At 2 in the morning, I woke up with a start. But this time it wasn't footsteps. It was silence. Absolute silence. I got up, left the room and walked to the stairs. And I heard the guest room door was open. Mark wasn't in bed. I froze. I walked past Emma's door. Her door was open too. But she was gone. And this time I didn't think she had left of her own accord. I called the police at 6:08 a.m. The voice on the other end was calm and automatic. They asked for a description, a photo, and her last known location. I said clearly, "My sister Emma is missing. Her phone is off. She didn't take any of her things. And she never left without warning. This isn't like her." "Maybe she just went away for a few days?" the operator asked. "She left all her things," I replied. "This isn't normal." They promised to send an officer to record the information. When I went downstairs, Mark was already setting up the coffee maker. He looked at me and asked calmly, "You haven't been sleeping?" I called the police. He nodded. A little too quickly. You did the right thing. This is a worrying situation. Mom was sitting on the couch hugging herself. She looked exhausted. I couldn't tell if she was really worried or just looking the way a mother whose daughter had disappeared should look. The officer arrived an hour later. He was young, a little sleepy, with a notepad and an irritated look on his face. Is she a minor? He asked immediately. 18, my mother replied. She's still at home, but technically she's an adult. Then we're not talking about a disappearance, but an unjustified absence. I knew it would be like this. They always find a way to downplay things, to pretend that it wasn't so bad, that maybe she had just had a fight, or run away. I left the room and went upstairs, and for the first time I felt that if I didn't find her myself, no one else would. I sat down at my laptop and opened her social media accounts. I looked for any clues. Messages, hints, actions. Nothing. No activity in the last 24 hours. Not even stories. Then I decided to check her old tablet. She used to say, I write everything here. The tablet wasn't in her room, but I remembered her password for her cloud account. She rarely changed it. I logged into iCloud. Photos, nothing new. Notes, almost empty. But there was one backup. Recent. The date was last night. I tried to open it, but most of the files were encrypted. Only one document was named Draft. I opened it. I'm afraid no one will believe me. But Mark. His attention has become disturbing. I tried to ignore it, but it won't stop. If anything happens to me, check my phone. All messages are saved. I felt cold. I took a screenshot, saved it to a flash drive, and immediately went downstairs. I need to talk to the officer, I said, heading into the living room. Mark was sitting next to the police officer, explaining something to him. He looked relaxed but alert. The officer listened and nodded. I knew he had already prepared his story for them. I have a file that Emma wrote before she disappeared, I said. In it, she points directly to Mark. The police officer raised his eyebrows suspiciously. He looked at Mark. Mark smiled slightly. It could be doctored, Mark said. She was depressed. We all grieve when we lose someone. Children often look for someone to blame, even when there is no one to blame. The police officer sighed and took the flash drive from me. We'll check it out, he said. But so far, we have no reason to believe that anything is wrong with Mr. Mark. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask if they were all blind. But I saw my mother's eyes. She wouldn't say anything either. She looked at Mark as if he were keeping her afloat. I left the house. I just walked out without explaining. And for the first time in my life, I realized I'm in this alone. And that's why I won't stop. I sat in the library for almost 4 hours. I opened the same websites, reread the same articles, but my mind was elsewhere. I was afraid to go home. Finally, I decided to check iCloud. Emma had never changed her password, and I remembered it exactly. The day my dad died plus the name of her favorite character from a children's book. Everything matched. I got into her account. Most of the files were old photos, nothing important. But I knew I had to dig deeper. Then I remembered Emma once saying if it's something serious, I save it as a draft. No one looks there. I went into her email. The Drafts tab. One file. No subject. Created the day before she disappeared. I clicked on it. This is the last thing I can do. He's watching me. He touches things in my room. He says that my mom chose him, so I have to too. If I disappear, he'll be right. I didn't run away. I was forced to. He did something to my phone, I can't text from it. But if you're reading this, it means I found a way to leave a trace. I barely made it to the end. I felt physically sick. My heart was beating like a drum. My head was empty, but my hands moved on their own. I copied the text, transferred it to a flash drive, and sent it to my backup email. Then I logged out of my account and cleared my history. The next step was a volunteer group on Telegram, a channel where people gathered information about missing persons. I wrote to the administrator, a woman named Sergeant Henley, who was mentioned in one of the comments on the video about Emma's disappearance. She replied quickly, "Send everything you have. But be careful. If you have surveillance at home, don't use your home Wi-Fi." I sent the file. She replied, "This is something. It's more serious than I thought. Keep the original and keep a copy with you. We can't act officially yet, but I'll open an internal case." I sat staring at the messages until my fingers started shaking. The house was quiet. Mark was in the kitchen cutting something with a knife. I walked in silently. "You're late," he said without looking up. "Everything okay?" "Just bad internet." "Yeah. By the way, I saw your phone in the bathroom. Don't leave it there, it's dangerous." "It's wet." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and went to my room. And then I saw it, a drawing on my pillow. Emma used to draw like that when she was younger. It was a sun in clouds. The caption read, "I'm still here." I didn't know if it was a real sign or a figment of my imagination. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to stop. I held the drawing in my hands for 10 minutes before I could bring myself to move. The sun with its childlike rays, the caption, "I'm still here," it was too much. Too close. Too timely. I called my mom to ask if she knew anything. She said she hadn't touched anything in my room. "The drawing? On the pillow?" I asked. "I thought it was yours. Something old." "I didn't leave anything. I knew it wasn't mine." Emma used to draw like that when we were 10. She had a notebook, her secret book, as she called it. It had the same crooked suns. And if that drawing was from that notebook, it meant someone had found it. And someone had brought it to me. I didn't sleep that night. I listened to every sound. The refrigerator humming. The floorboards creaking. Footsteps. Everything blended together, but the worst part was that I couldn't hear anything obvious. Just the feeling that something was there. Something nearby. At dawn, I got up. The first thing I did was go to Emma's room. I opened the closets, nightstands, boxes. Everything looked almost sterile. As if someone had cleaned up. Or hidden something. In the bottom drawer of her desk, I found a notebook. Old. Black cover scratched. I hadn't seen it in years. I opened it and found the same drawings inside. The sun, houses, names. Pages with torn out sheets. And among them, an empty envelope. White. On the back, someone had written in pencil, "I won't keep quiet." I almost fell over. But I held myself back. I took the notebook, put it in my backpack, and went back to my room. I locked the door. Next step, I decided to check the guest room. While no one was home, I went upstairs. Mark always kept it under control, saying, "Don't touch anything in there." I knelt down and opened the drawer under the bed. Inside were neatly folded clothes, t-shirts, tools, an old laptop, not mine, not Emma's, and several photos and envelopes. I pulled one out and froze. In the photo were my mom and dad. And Mark. But my dad had been cut out. He was simply gone. As if cut out with scissors. And on the back was written, "Now it's right." I almost lost control. I started digging deeper. More photos. Emma and me as children again with my dad cut out. Another one, us at the beach, Mark in the background, everything cut out except him. All the photos were carefully preserved. All of them were from the past. And all of them had been rewritten. I shoved them back in and closed the drawer. I left. I locked the guest room door as it was. And at that moment I realized he definitely knew I had been there. He was watching everything. I went to my room quickly. I hid the notebook. I wrote down what I had found. And for the first time in my life, I said out loud, "He's been planning this for years. We just didn't see it." And now I knew, if I didn't make it in time, she would never say, "I'm still here," again. I woke up with my fists clenched. My fingers hurt. I had squeezed them so tightly during the night that my skin was scratched by my nails. But the fear had receded. It was replaced by cold determination. If I didn't save Emma, no one else would. Sergeant Henley hadn't responded for 3 days. I checked my messages. The last one read, "I'm watching. There's a leak. Stay safe." And then silence. I went to school, hoping for an hour of peace, but the principal intercepted me at the entrance. She was holding my school tablet. "We've received an anonymous complaint," she said. "A file with unacceptable content has been found on your internal memory." She showed me the screen. It was my screenshot, the one where Emma had written about Mark. The file was named screen_27 final, exactly the same as the one I had at home. But I hadn't transferred it there. I froze. "He could have done it," I whispered. "Who?" "Mark. He could have intercepted the files. He knows my passwords." She looked at me suspiciously but said nothing. She said she would give the tablet to the IT department. And she told me to take a break. I left and went home. The lights were on inside. Mark was not there. My mom was in the kitchen with a cup of tea. She looked exhausted. An old router was peeking out from under the table. Then it dawned on me. I opened my laptop and logged into the admin panel. And I saw that 2 other devices that weren't marked as home had been connected to the network in the last 14 days. One of them was a camera. Its name was Basement View 56. I couldn't believe my eyes. We hadn't had cameras for a long time. My dad had taken them down when I was still in middle school. But I remembered there was one in the basement. Just in case, he said. I thought we had thrown it away long ago. I opened the IP address. An archive opened. Black and white video. And me. I was sitting in the kitchen a week ago, talking to Emma. Then a conversation with my mom. Then a phone call. Everything was recorded. Without our knowledge. Someone was watching us. Not just by accident, systematically. I turned off the router. I took the camera out of the basement. It was behind a toolbox. It was still working. And then I remembered, Mark once mentioned an old van, a utility van at an abandoned construction site. He said, there's something left in their tools, it's better than a storage room. I didn't pay attention at the time. But now I remembered it clearly. And the look on his face when he said it. As if he was hiding something. I decided to go there. Alone. I woke up early. I put on my sportswear. My phone was in my pocket. A small camera with a tracker was on my belt. I took a bottle of water and my headphones. I looked like a girl going for a run. I went to the abandoned construction site. The one on the southern edge of the city where a shopping center was supposed to be built 8 years ago. Everything was left unfinished. Concrete blocks, gravel, metal beams. And then I saw it. A van. White, shabby, camouflaged with branches. It was parked under a canopy. The spot was almost invisible. I approached it. I listened. Silence. I knocked. At first, there was no response. Then, "Is that you?" A woman's voice. Hoarse. Quiet. I didn't answer. I just pressed the button on the tracker. And opened the door. There was Emma. Alive. Thin. Sweaty. Her eyes had the same determination I remembered. But her body was broken. Her embrace was weak but sincere. "He's sleeping here," she whispered. "But he's not here now." I didn't know when I'd get a chance. I pulled her through a side gap and led her past the concrete. We ran to the garage of my dad's old friend who lived nearby. Mark returned an hour later. But we were already far away. Emma and I sat in the garage wrapped in an old blanket that Mr. Rollings, our neighbor and my father's former friend, had given us. He silently placed 2 cups of tea in front of us and closed the garage door. "I won't ask," he said. "But tell me, should we call anyone?" "The police," I said. "But not everyone. There's one person, Sergeant Henley. She's the only one who really listened." I texted her from an anonymous number. The message remained unread. But I received a short text from another account. "I'm safe. You are too. I'm handing the case over to Internal Affairs. Don't go home." For the first time in a long time, I cried. Out of relief. And out of anger. Mark was still at large. He could come back at any moment. But now we knew who he really was. And that was enough to fight. Emma slept fitfully. She woke up at every creak. Her body jerked when I touched her shoulder. She didn't eat. She only drank water. I didn't ask her much. I just held her hand. "He said he saved us," she whispered at night. "That without him we would be dead. That Dad didn't deserve us." I didn't know what to say. She was so quiet that words seemed unnecessary. The next day we went to the police station together. To the station where Henley worked. We were greeted by another woman, a lieutenant from the homicide division. She already knew who we were. "We received a file from Sergeant Henley," she said. "And she passed on your story too." She had suspected Mark for a long time, but she needed proof. Now she has it. We gave her everything: notes, screenshots, photos, audio files, GPS data, the archive from the basement camera. She asked for copies of everything. "But keep everything to yourselves for now. We don't want him to know he's been exposed." "It's a matter of hours," she said. I asked, "Are you going to arrest him?" "We want more. We want to find out what else he's done." It turned out he was involved in 2 other unsolved cases. But they had been frozen for a long time. One detective who worked on them had been fired. The other had disappeared from the contact list. Mark's name had disappeared from the databases a few years ago. But he had always been around. Emma and I returned to Rollings. I helped her take a shower and get changed. She asked me not to leave her alone, even for a minute. In the evening, my mother called. She was crying. She said Mark had been arrested. That the police had come to the house. That he hadn't resisted. He was just packing his things. Everyone was silent. He was smiling, Lauren, she whispered. When they took him away, he was smiling. And he looked at me like I had betrayed him. You didn't betray him. You just finally saw him. My mother was silent. Then she said something I didn't expect. I'm going to therapy. I have to. I didn't know what to say. But for the first time in a long time, I believed her. The next morning, we received official confirmation. Mark was being held in custody. He was charged with kidnapping, invasion of privacy, document forgery, and possession of illegal materials. And there was a new suspicion: psychological influence on minors with the aim of forming dependence. He didn't say a word during the interrogation. He just repeated one phrase. They'll understand who they've lost. But we didn't lose. We found one another, ourselves. 2 days after Mark's arrest, Emma and I became faces of the story. Without our consent. The first article appeared in the local newspaper. The headline read, Family Hero or Manipulator, the story of Mark G. The photo was taken from our social media accounts. Cropped, taken out of context. The comments were predictable. That's not like him. I knew him, he was a great guy. The girls are making it up to get attention. I didn't read any further. But Emma did. She closed her phone silently. She didn't cry. She just pressed her lips together. The next morning, we got a call from a TV show. They offered us the chance to tell our side of the story. In exchange for public support, a psychologist, and protection. I refused. Emma did too. But the story had already taken on a life of its own. At school, people looked at me differently. Some with sympathy. Some with condemnation. One boy I had never spoken to wrote, I feel sorry for your mother. She trusted him. Another girl wrote under a photo on Instagram, Drama Queen. I didn't respond. But with each passing day, the silence grew louder. The police worked silently. My mom and I went to interrogations. The lawyer said the case would be heard in open court. Because the crimes were serious and there was public outcry. But along with the lawyers came others. Journalists. Anonymous messages. Threats. You ruined his life. Your father would be ashamed. You're no better. I didn't know how to stop it. Sergeant Henley reappeared, this time officially. She came to our house. She spoke to my mother. To me. To Emma. She said, you shouldn't have had to go through this. But you stood your ground. That's rare. I asked, what about him? She looked at me for a long time. Then she replied, he's a product of the system. But he's also a predator. He had opportunities, connections. He exploited trauma, grief, weakness. It's classic. But he was wrong about you. You're not his story. Those words broke something inside me. Not in a bad way. For the first time, I allowed myself to breathe more deeply. In the evening, I sat down next to Emma. We drank cocoa. She said, I was afraid I would never see you again. That everything would go back to the way it was. That my mother wouldn't believe me. That the world wouldn't believe me. I was scared too, I replied. But at some point, the fear lost its power. When? When I realized that he wanted silence. And we're not the ones who keep quiet. Emma smiled. Genuinely. For the first time. We never kept quiet, did we? Never. The courtroom smelled of dust and fatigue. People whispered, glanced at their phones, shifted from foot to foot. Everyone was waiting. The lawyers stood with stony faces. Journalists with cameras. Police officers stood silently around the perimeter. I sat next to my mother. Emma was a little further away between the defense attorneys. She didn't want to, but she had to testify. Her face was white as a sheet. Her shoulders were hunched. Her eyes were wide open, but lifeless. And then they brought him in. Mark. He looked calm. His hair was combed, his shirt was perfectly ironed. He had a smile on his face, but his eyes were empty. He looked at me. And at my mother. And at Emma. And then he turned away for the first time. The judge, a woman in her 60s, opened the hearing. Dryly, clearly, they began to read out the list of charges. Kidnapping, psychological pressure, stalking, interference in personal life, falsification of data, possession of illegal equipment, blackmail, manipulation of minors, illegal intrusion into digital property. Each point was like a stone in my stomach. Mark's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, we deny most of the charges. All of them are emotionally charged interpretations of facts presented by teenagers who have experienced the trauma of loss. My client is a family friend who tried to help. He is being persecuted because he was there when their father died. I clenched my fingers so tightly that my nails dug into my skin. Emma was called first. She walked to the stand as if she were carrying concrete. Her voice trembled. But she didn't look away. He controlled me, she said. He said I was grateful. That I didn't understand how lucky I was to have him. He said my mother was broken and only he could keep us together. And when I tried to leave, he locked the door. Mark's lawyer asked, "Do you have any evidence?" "Yes. Audio recordings. Photos. Letters." "Why didn't you leave right away?" "Because I was afraid. And I knew they wouldn't believe me." And I was right, many still don't believe me. After her, it was my turn to speak. I told everything, the tablet, the screenshots, the cameras, the van. The judge listened silently. And Mark smiled. When I said, "I didn't know adults could be so dangerous. I thought evil was something far away. But it was sitting at our table." He stopped smiling. And just then, the defense attorney called an unexpected witness. A woman entered the courtroom. She was tall. In a dark suit. She looked like a character from an FBI movie. "This is Ms. Lisa Mendez," said the lawyer. The former director of the treatment center where Mark worked. She states that Mark was undergoing rehabilitation for PTSD, was under supervision, and never violated the rules. On the contrary, he was described as reliable, stable, and responsible. Mark looked at us with an expression that said, "I told you so." But then Lisa Mendez looked straight at the judge and said, "I don't work there anymore. And I'm not here to defend him. I'm a witness. I quit because I found something in his notes that scared me." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge bowed her head. "He kept a journal," she continued. "A detailed one. About children. Families. Drawings. Photos. All with the words, 'They don't know it yet, but they're mine.'" I saw Emma's shoulders tremble. Mark lowered his eyes. And then I realized he had lost. Not when he was arrested. But now. When everyone saw who he really was. When his silence finally spoke. The court's decision was scheduled to be announced at 9 in the morning. We arrived early not because we were punctual but because we wanted to have time to breathe. After the verdict, we might have to learn how to breathe again. There were fewer people in the courtroom. Fewer cameras. For the press, the story had lost its edge. But not for us. Mark sat behind the glass. No handcuffs. Just a plain gray-green shirt. He looked worse. Dark circles under his eyes, his hands scratched. But his eyes still had the same cold emptiness. The judge appeared without any formal introductions. She was holding a folder with the verdict. Based on the investigation, witness testimony, digital evidence, and the conclusions of an independent psychiatric examination, she began, the court has determined that the defendant committed the acts described. I squeezed Emma's hand. Her fingers were ice cold. However, the judge continued, according to the expert opinion, the defendant was in a state of mental disorder that significantly affected his ability to understand the nature and consequences of his actions. He has been found not guilty by reason of insanity. A wave of whispering swept through the courtroom. Emma clenched her jaw. I held my breath. The defendant is subject to compulsory treatment in a closed psychiatric facility under round-the-clock supervision. The term is indefinite. His condition will be assessed every 6 months. I looked at Mark. And for the first time, I saw not only evil. But it didn't lessen the pain. Because he might not have understood what he had done, but we did. We had lived through it. The judge concluded, he will no longer have his freedom. But you, she looked at us, must reclaim yours. We left in silence. It felt like there was going to be a storm outside. But it was sunny. "This isn't real punishment," Emma whispered. "This isn't what we expected," I replied. "But it's the end. At least partially." In the evening, we sat in the kitchen. The locks had already been changed. All his things were burned. The cameras were destroyed. Mom was cooking dinner. For the first time in a long time. "So what now?" I asked. "Now we take back what is ours," she said. "Every habit. Every inch of silence. But now without fear." I applied to an organization that works with victims of digital violence. They were looking for volunteers who had been through something similar. Emma started therapy. And she started drawing again. The same crooked sun she drew as a child. But now with us at the center. My mother signed up for group support. For the first time in her life, she admitted that she couldn't do it alone. And all of us, for the first time in many months, went to bed in silence. No cameras. No surveillance. No prying eyes. The night after the trial was quiet. Too quiet. Not depressing, not anxious, just real. We sat in the kitchen, Emma, Mom, and me. The tea had grown cold, the lights were dim, the clock didn't tick. It was just us. Mom stared at her hands for a long time. Then she looked at us. I want to say something. And please don't interrupt, she began quietly. We were silent. I owe you. I let him into our home. I let him take your father's place, she looked at me, and your place, she looked at Emma. I wanted someone to fix everything. But he just took over. And I didn't see it. I didn't want to see. Emma swallowed hard. I could feel her hand trembling in mine. I saw you pulling away, Emma, Mom continued. But I thought it was grief. You were screaming silently with your eyes, with your behavior, but I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. Emma was silent. But a tear rolled down her cheek. Not just one. She didn't sob. She just cried silently. And you, Lauren, my mother looked at me. You fought for us. And for her. And for me. I know that. But I was blind. I didn't want to see that everything was wrong. I didn't protect you. I trusted a stranger more than I trusted you. And I will never forgive myself for that. Mom. I started, but she raised her hand. Give me a minute. I can't change what I've done. But I can be here. Be with you. Learn to see better. To listen. Believe. And I promise. From this day forward, I will always be on your side. No buts, no doubts. You are my children. And I should have been your shield. If I can still be that shield, let me. We sat in silence. Then Emma stood up and simply hugged her mother. Silently. And I followed suit. The three of us stood there like a tower. Broken but alive. For the first time truly together. The next morning I received a letter. From the same organization. An invitation to a roundtable for victims of digital violence. Direct participation. Anonymous. No cameras. But with a story. I read it twice. 3 times. Then I turned off the screen. In the evening, Emma saw the look on my face. What's wrong? I showed her the letter. She read it. And just asked, do you want to? I didn't know. I'm scared. It doesn't have to be for everyone. But if you say yes, someone will see it. And maybe they won't repeat what happened to us. I nodded. Not confidently. But inside something stirred. That night I opened my laptop. For the first time, not to look for something disturbing. But to write. My name is Lauren. And I know that silence can scream. And I know how to learn to hear it. I pressed send. I was invited to speak at a university campus. A small gathering of 40 students, moderated by a psychology professor. The topic was digital violence. The invisible threat. I stood at the podium with a microphone, my hands shaking and my heart pounding as if I were back in the shadows of the basement, facing Mark's cold stare. But I wasn't there anymore. I looked out into the room. My name is Lauren. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a lawyer. And I'm definitely not an expert. But I know what it's like when a stranger becomes a wall between you and the world. When silence is not peace but a trap. When a camera is not safety but a threat. I spoke for about half an hour. I read excerpts from Emma's diary. I described my fear when I didn't know if I would ever see my sister again. I remembered my mother and how important it was to forgive her. And myself. After my speech, people came up to me. Some silently shook my hand. Others shared their stories. And most importantly, several girls said that for the first time, they felt that something was wrong with them. But it wasn't their fault. And that was worth everything. Emma started volunteering at the same organization. She created an art group for teenagers who had gone through similar experiences. They drew their fears. And their victory. She was good at it. She was living again. Her mother enrolled in a self-defense class. She didn't hit anyone, but she said, I don't want to be weak anymore. Not even in my head. And I was no longer afraid of the silence at night. Because I knew that if it came back, I would hear it first. And I wouldn't turn away. A year has passed. Everything is different, but much remains the same. Fear doesn't disappear forever. But now it doesn't control us. If you are reading these lines, it means that the story has reached you. And therefore it was not in vain. Because the greatest enemy of evil is not force. It is a witness. Those were the hardest months of my life. Months when I felt like I was alone, that everything I felt was made up, that adults were right and my suspicions were just stress. But the truth doesn't need permission. Just is. And it hurts. Sometimes so much that you want to run away. But it is your weapon.